I have an unforgettable memory of when our school went into lockdown. I remember it perfectly. It was the end of 7th grade. It was a crisp Tuesday morning. We were in math class. This classroom had one entrance in the corner of the room, and all the windows were on the opposite wall from that door. There were no windows facing the hallway. Our teacher, Mr. Anderson, was in the middle of explaining algebraic equations when the loudspeaker crackled to life. Principal Johnson's voice echoed through the classroom, ordering an immediate lockdown. The classroom plunged into darkness as Mr. Anderson snapped off the lights. Panic rippled through my classmates. We shuffled towards the corner, trying to remain quiet while some of us were getting emotional. We'd only practiced this once before, so we were quite disorganized, and our teacher had to keep quietly reminding us to hide in the corner behind our desks. My desk neighbor Sarah started crying and asking me what was happening. I shrugged and told her I wasn't sure. I remember my heart pounding against my ribcage. Minutes felt like hours. We huddled together, anxiously waiting for any information. The classroom windows were veiled with heavy curtains, so we couldn't see outside. Mr. Anderson maintained his composure, but I could sense his fear. It had been a while since we'd heard anything, and nobody had a phone back then, so we were completely in the dark. As our teacher approached the door to listen, a loud crash echoed through the corridor, causing everyone to freeze on the spot. The sudden deafening noise was followed by a series of sharp bangs, as if something were violently striking the classroom doors. Fear swept through us like wildfire, and my heart pounded in my chest. Our teacher's face went pale. Even in the dark I could see his face from the little bit of light that peeked through the side of the door. The banging on the doors continued, growing louder and more relentless with each passing moment. It was so intense that I could feel the walls vibrating each time. The intercom was painfully silent. Our imaginations ran wild, conjuring up all sorts of scenarios. Was there an intruder in the school? A dangerous criminal? A student going on a rampage? Out of nowhere there were screams from down the hallway. The screaming intensified as we could hear repeated banging on the doors and the sounds of windows being smashed. The sound was full of panic, and we couldn't fathom what was happening outside. Time stretched on, the banging or screaming showing no sign of stopping. The sound of heavy footsteps echoed through the corridor. I held my breath, and my eyes darted towards the classroom door. All I heard was a barrage of shouting men. Some giving direct orders, others seemingly just shouting as loud as possible. It was like a battle cry. Just a bunch of men roaring like animals. The noise was only amplified by the echoing hallway. The banging and screaming stopped, and a few minutes later we noticed a shadow at the door. The doorknob slowly turned, and it creaked open. My pulse quickened as I braced for the worst. Shadows danced at the entrance, and we all stared wide-eyed at the intruder. But what stepped into our classroom wasn't a menacing figure. It was Mr. Thompson, the school's custodian. Relief washed over us as we realized we were safe. Mr. Thompson calmed us all down before explaining that a bear had wandered onto the school grounds. The culprit behind our traumatizing experience was a large frightened bear. It had let itself in through one of the doors to the yard and then panicked when it closed behind it. The staff were trying to open the door again and coax it out from the outside, but their attempts just pushed it deeper into the school and it started to panic. That's why it was attacking the doors and ended up causing so much chaos. As we exited the lockdown, our adrenaline was still pumping. But now it was mixed with an overwhelming feeling of relief. That visit from a bear was something we'd remember for the rest of our lives. My middle school was once on lockdown, and I was actually somewhat a part of it. When our bus pulled up to the school, the doors opened and our principal and a few police got on the bus. There were police cars around the parking lot, and my principal pointed at 4 of us and told us to get off the bus and go with them. We headed to the school and then into the principal's office. We sat down in there and then he asked us, "Why do you guys think you are here today?" One of the kids in there, I wouldn't really call him my friend, just someone I talked with at school, replied. "Mr. Principal, I heard someone was bringing a gun into school today." The principal looks directly into my eyes with a seriously fear-inducing stare. He says, "Yes. And I heard this person was bringing the gun in for you." When he said, "this person," it was clear he was hinting at me. And considering I had nothing to do with this, I thought this was hilarious but also terrifying. Damn, you could have heard a pin drop in the room with that silence. They'd already taken our bags off us for a search, and we had cops stood behind us, staring at us the whole time. The first guy, the one who'd said he heard someone was bringing a gun in, finally decided to come clean. He just said, "You've got the wrong Michael." They'd already checked our bags, and at this point they started to pat us down. They saw that I clearly didn't have a gun, so the principal told me and my other friend to sit out in the lobby. While we were waiting in the hallway, we saw the officers following one of the teachers down towards the classrooms. Then our principal announced over the intercom that we were in lockdown. The kid they went looking for, his name was Michael, which is also my name. He brought a gun into school that day for the other guy in the office. The school said the gun was unloaded, but I don't know if I believe that. From what I heard, the gun was going to be given to the other kid because there was supposed to be a fight after school that day, and he wanted a way to protect himself if things got out of hand. The reason I was taken into the office with them is since the kid who brought the gun in was named Michael, they assumed that it was me. It kind of bothered me that I was searched by the police and treated like a criminal because they hadn't bothered to check which Michael might be more likely to bring a gun in. I was a super quiet teenager, never got into any trouble, and the other Michael was always in detention, would get into fights constantly, literally already had an incident with a gun in the past, and yet they heard the name Michael and assumed it would be me. I didn't even get an apology. Just sent back to my class once lockdown was over. My school was a place where not much ever really happened. But one sunny afternoon, things got real weird. School was the same old routine, teachers doing their teaching, and us students just trying to keep our eyes open. I was in Mrs. Patterson's class when we started hearing whispers. The rumors going around were that there had been some strange sightings outside. One girl said that she was followed as she came in late, another guy said he saw someone trying to climb the side of the school. Outside, it was a typical blue sky day, but with what we'd all been hearing, the bright summer's day managed to have an element of creepiness to it. The hallways were typically silent during class, but that day I heard at least a few times some hurried footsteps and teachers shouting out of their class, occasionally reminding the noisemakers that they should be silent. Recess came, but it felt different. No laughter, no shouting, just a strange quiet. We all stared at the trees around the schoolyard, wondering what the heck was up. Something wasn't right, but none of us wanted to come right out and say it. As the day wore on, the rumors got wilder. Some kids claimed they'd seen a guy lurking behind the trees, looking all scruffy and stumbling around. Others swore they heard mumbling coming from inside the school. Mrs. Patterson tried to reassure us, saying it was probably just our imaginations or maybe some lost hiker. But as the afternoon rolled along, we were all getting jumpy. Those odd sounds outside were getting louder, and people in the class were starting to lose it. Finally, Principal Mr. O'Connor made an announcement that we had to go into lockdown. Fear ran through the school as teachers rushed us back to our classrooms. We sat there in silence, waiting and wondering what the heck was happening. Minutes ticked by, each one filled with those strange sounds outside. Then, we heard police sirens. We all listened closely, hearts pounding in our chests. A loud bang echoed through the hallway, making all of us jump in our seats. Someone was pounding on the classroom door next to us, their fists hitting it with a force that made the walls creak. The screams of terror down the hallway grew louder. Mr. O'Connor showed up at our classroom door, beads of sweat on his forehead. He looked like he'd just dodged a bullet. "Stay here," he said, his voice shaking. "The police are here, and they'll sort everything out." There was a bunch of commotion outside the classroom, further down the hallway. Police were shouting at a guy to get down and show his hands. We could hear the guy shouting back at them, slurring his speech and saying something about not leaving until he gets her. Eventually we saw him being dragged out in handcuffs. The teachers found it impossible to calm us down at that point. Parents were coming into school to collect their children, and teachers had given up trying to teach anything. It turns out he was the father of a girl in another class. He had a big fallout with her mother and gotten drunk or high and came to pick up his girl after the mother threatened to never let him see her again. In the end, the whole thing was just sad rather than scary, but at the time it was the scariest thing that had ever happened to most of us.